The last ember of daylight faded beyond the Montana horizon as Bethany Rawlins stumbled forward, her swollen feet burning with each step along the dusty trail that stretched endlessly before her. The small bundle against her chest whimpered softly her 6-month-old son, Samuel, who hadn't had proper milk in 2 days. "Just a little further, my love," Bethany whispered, though she had no idea where further might lead them. Her husband's grave was 3 days behind her, alongside the charred remains of the cabin they'd built together. The fever had taken him quickly, too quickly for her to even say goodbye properly. Then came the fire, whether from bandits or accident, she couldn't say. She'd grabbed what she could: a small satchel of food, a canteen, a blanket for Samuel, and the locket containing a lock of her husband's hair. The night air grew cold against her flushed cheeks. Samuel's crying intensified, his tiny body trembling against hers. Bethany's legs threatened to give out as she lowered herself onto a large rock beside the trail. She shrugged off her shawl and wrapped it tighter around Samuel, who continued to wail. "I know, sweetheart, I know," she murmured, her voice cracking. The loneliness of the vast plains stretched around her, making her feel smaller than she'd ever felt. She was 22, widowed, with a hungry child and nowhere to go except forward on this trail that supposedly led to the mining town of Silver Creek. In the distance, she heard the faint sound of hooves. Her heart raced as she gathered Samuel closer, eyes searching the darkness. If these were bandits, she had nothing to offer except the wedding ring still on her finger. She slipped behind a cluster of boulders, holding her breath. The sound grew louder. A single rider, from what she could tell. The outline of horse and man materialized in the moonlight, a large figure atop a chestnut stallion, moving at a steady pace. As he drew nearer, she could make out the wide-brimmed hat and the glint of what might have been a badge on his vest. Samuel let out another piercing cry, and the rider immediately reined in his horse. His head turned toward their hiding place. "Hello." His voice was deep but not threatening. "Someone there?" Bethany remained silent, clutching Samuel tighter. "I mean no harm," sounded like a baby. The man dismounted, his boots crunching on the rocky path. "I'm Ranger Russell Fairfield. If you're in trouble, I can help." The title Ranger eased her fear slightly. Samuel cried out again, and Bethany knew she couldn't stay hidden. "We're here," she called, her voice thin with exhaustion. She stepped out from behind the boulders, her legs trembling. The ranger approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance. In the moonlight, she could see his face, now mid-30s perhaps, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' growth and eyes that seemed kind even in the darkness. "Madam," he said, removing his hat, "you shouldn't be out here alone, especially not with a little one." "I don't have much choice," Bethany replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm headed to Silver Creek." Russell Fairfield studied her for a moment, noting her worn dress, the tear tracks on her dirt-smudged face, and the desperate way she held her crying child. "That's more than 2 days' ride from here, madam." He glanced at the small bundle in her arms. "Your baby needs shelter for the night." "We'll manage," Bethany said, though even to her own ears the words sounded hollow. The ranger sighed, replacing his hat. "There's a homestead about an hour's ride from here. Widow Malone's place. She's good people. I was just heading there myself to check on her." He paused. "I could take you both." Bethany hesitated. Her mother had always warned her about the dangers of trusting strangers, especially men on the frontier. But Samuel was hungry and she was on the verge of collapse. "I don't want charity," she managed. A ghost of a smile crossed the ranger's face. "It's not charity, madam. It's human decency. And besides, Mrs. Malone would have my hide if I left a woman and child alone on the trail at night." After a moment's consideration, Bethany nodded. "Thank you, Ranger Fairfield. Call me Russell," he said, leading his horse closer. "Let me help you up first." With unexpected gentleness for such a large man, he lifted her and Samuel onto the horse before mounting behind them. His arms created a protective circle around them as he took the reins, and Bethany felt a strange mixture of relief and uneasiness at being so close to a stranger. Hold tight to your little one, Russell instructed as the horse began to move. The trail gets rough in places. As they rode through the night, Bethany found herself swaying with exhaustion, occasionally leaning back against the ranger's solid chest to keep from falling. Samuel, surprisingly, had quieted, lulled by the steady rhythm of the horse's gait. "What's his name?" Russell asked after they'd been riding in silence for some time. "Samuel," Bethany replied. "After my father." Russell nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Good, strong name. How old?" 6 months next week. "And what brings you to this trail alone, Mrs. Rawlins?" "Bethany Rawlins." She swallowed hard. "My husband Thomas died of fever 4 days ago, then our cabin burned. Silver Creek is where my cousin lives." The ranger was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Rawlins." Bethany didn't respond. She'd heard those words so many times in her head that they'd lost meaning. Instead, she asked, "What brings a ranger out this way?" "Reports of cattle rustling near the Montana border. I've been tracking them for 2 weeks." He adjusted his hold on the reins. "Found their camp yesterday, but they'd already moved on. I'm headed back to report." As they crested a hill, a small light appeared in the distance, a lantern burning in a window. "That's Widow Malone's place," Russell said. "We're almost there." The homestead was modest but well kept, a sturdy log cabin with a small barn and corral. As they approached, the front door opened and an elderly woman appeared, shotgun in hand. "Who goes there?" she called. "It's Russell Fairfield, Mrs. Malone. I've brought guests." The woman lowered her shotgun but didn't set it aside. "Bit late for social calls, Ranger. Found them on the trail, mother and baby. They need shelter for the night." Mrs. Malone's expression softened as Russell helped Bethany and Samuel down from the horse. "Well, bring them in then. Don't just stand there letting the night air in." Inside, the cabin was warm and smelled of fresh bread. Mrs. Malone, Agnes, as she insisted Bethany call her, took one look at the exhausted young mother and immediately set about making her comfortable. "You look half-starved, child," she said, guiding Bethany to a chair by the fire. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning," Bethany admitted. "I've been saving what little food I have left for the journey." Agnes tusked disapprovingly and began ladling stew from a pot hanging over the fire. "And the baby, what's he eating?" Bethany flushed with shame. I've been giving him sugar water, my milk. It started to dry up after Thomas died." Agnes and Russell exchanged a concerned glance. "I have goat's milk," Agnes said decisively. "Not as good as mother's milk, but better than sugar water." "Russell, fetch some from the cold cellar, would you?" While Russell stepped outside, Agnes handed Bethany a bowl of stew. "Eat. Then you'll wash up and rest. Questions can wait until morning." Bethany ate ravenously, the rich stew the first proper meal she'd had in days. When Russell returned with the goat's milk, Agnes showed her how to feed Samuel using a cloth dipped in the warmed milk. The baby sucked eagerly, his little hands grasping at the cloth. "There's a bathing tub behind the screen," Agnes said when they'd finished. "I'll heat water for you." After bathing and changing into a clean nightdress loaned by Agnes, Bethany felt almost human again. Agnes had prepared a small bed for Samuel in a wooden dresser drawer padded with soft blankets, and he was already sleeping peacefully. "Thank you," Bethany said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." Agnes waved away her thanks. "There's no debt between women helping each other. Now sleep. We'll talk more in the morning." As Bethany settled into the comfortable bed, she heard the low murmur of voices from the main room where Russell and Agnes were speaking. Their words were indistinct, but the concern in their tones was clear. She should have felt worried about what they were discussing, but exhaustion claimed her before she could dwell on it. Morning came with the scent of coffee and bacon. Bethany woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until Samuel's soft cooing brought her back to reality. She gathered him up, marveling at how much more peaceful he seemed after a night of proper rest and food. In the main room, Agnes was at the stove while Russell sat at the table cleaning his revolver. "Good morning," Bethany said hesitantly. Russell immediately stood, holstering his weapon. Mrs. Rawlins, how did you sleep? Better than I have in weeks, she admitted. And Samuel too. Agnes brought over a plate of food. Sit and eat, child. Your little one's already had his breakfast. Russell fed him while you slept. Bethany looked at the ranger in surprise. He shrugged, seeming almost embarrassed. I have nieces and nephews, not my first time with a baby. As Bethany ate, Agnes and Russell told her they'd been discussing her situation. Silver Creek is still a good way off, Agnes said, and that trail's no place for a woman alone with a child. I'll be fine, Bethany insisted, though with less conviction than before. I've made it this far. Russell leaned forward, his expression serious. Mrs. Rawlins, there's been trouble in these parts. The men I've been tracking, they're not just rustlers. They've attacked travelers, especially those who look vulnerable. A chill ran through Bethany. What are you suggesting? I'm heading back to Fort Benton today, which is about halfway to Silver Creek. From there, I can arrange safe passage for you the rest of the way. He hesitated. If you'll allow me to escort you. Bethany studied him, trying to gauge his intentions. Her instincts told her he was trustworthy, but she'd learned the hard way that the frontier could change men. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Russell's eyes met hers. Because it's the right thing to do. And because I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you and your boy when I could have prevented it. Agnes nodded approvingly. Russell's a good man, Bethany, one of the few. If he offers help, it comes with no strings. After considering her limited options, Bethany agreed. We'll need to leave today, though. My cousin is expecting us, and I don't want her to worry. We can be ready within the hour, Russell said, true to his word. An hour later, they were prepared to depart. Agnes had packed them food for the journey and given Bethany a small container of goat's milk for Samuel, along with extra clothing and blankets. This is too much, Bethany protested. Agnes took her hands firmly. My daughter would be about your age if the cholera hadn't taken her. Let an old woman help a young one, Tears stung Bethany's eyes as she embraced the older woman. I'll find a way to repay you someday. Just survive, Agnes whispered. That's payment enough in this hard country. Russell had brought Agnes's spare horse, a gentle mare named Daisy, for Bethany to ride. He fashioned a sling for Samuel so Bethany could carry him securely against her chest while riding. As they set off, Bethany looked back at the small homestead, committing it to memory. Agnes stood in the doorway, one hand raised in farewell, the other discreetly wiping her eyes. The journey to Fort Benton would take a full day's ride. Russell set a careful pace, mindful of his companion's comfort. He pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his 8 years as a ranger, gradually drawing Bethany out of her shell. How did you come to be out here? He asked as they stopped to rest the horses beside a small creek. Bethany watched Samuel play with a wildflower she'd picked. Thomas had gold fever. We came west from Pennsylvania 2 years ago. He never found his fortune, but we were happy with our little homestead. She sighed. Or I was, anyway. I think Thomas always dreamed of something bigger. And you, what did you dream of? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked about her dreams in a very long time. A home, she finally said. Children, safety, simple things. Russell nodded, understanding in his eyes. Those aren't simple things out here, they're the hardest to come by. As they continued riding, Bethany found herself studying the ranger when he wasn't looking. There was a quiet strength about him that reminded her a little of her father. But there was something else too, a sadness behind his eyes that spoke of his own losses. Have you ever been married, Ranger Fairfield? She asked suddenly, then immediately regretted her boldness. I'm sorry, that's too personal. Russell didn't seem offended. No, never married, came close once about 5 years back. Sarah was her name. She couldn't abide the ranger life, the danger, the long absences. Can't say I blamed her. Do you regret it? Not giving up the badge for her? He considered this for a moment. Some days, but most times I think we both made the right choice. She's married to a shopkeeper in Helena now. Has 2 children, he smiled faintly. She sends me a letter every Christmas, says she prays for my safety. The conversation lulled as they rode through a narrow pass between rocky outcroppings. Russell suddenly raised his hand, signaling Bethany to stop. His posture had changed, alert and tense. "What is it?" she whispered. "Not sure," he murmured, his hand moving to his revolver. "Something doesn't feel right." They remained still, the only sounds their horses' breathing and Samuel's soft babbling. Then Russell relaxed slightly. "Probably nothing. But we'll take the long way around just to be safe. There's another trail that adds a few hours but keeps us in the open." As the day wore on, Bethany found herself growing increasingly comfortable in Russell's company. He was different from Thomas, more measured, less impulsive. Where Thomas had been full of grand dreams and schemes, Russell seemed content with the reality of his life, however harsh it might be. By late afternoon, Samuel had grown fussy. They stopped in a small grove of trees to feed and change him. Russell built a small fire to warm the goat's milk, keeping his rifle close at hand. "You're good with him," Bethany observed as Russell gently bounced Samuel while she prepared the milk. Russell smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Like I said, lots of nieces and nephews. My sister has 5 children and my brother has 3. You must miss them. Every day, but this life doesn't leave much room for family." He handed Samuel back to Bethany for feeding. "What about you? Any family besides your cousin in Silver Creek?" Bethany shook her head. "My parents died before we came west. I have a brother somewhere in California, but we lost touch years ago." She hesitated. "My cousin Charlotte is really just a childhood friend. We grew up together and she's the closest thing to family I have left." Russell nodded, understanding the unspoken worry in her voice. "If she's in Silver Creek, we'll find her. It's not a big place." They continued their journey as the sun began its descent. Samuel, fed and content, slept against Bethany's chest. The landscape had changed to rolling hills dotted with pine trees, and in the distance, Bethany could make out what looked like the first signs of civilization, thin columns of smoke rising from chimneys. "Is that Fort Benton?" she asked. Russell nodded. "We should reach it by nightfall. There's an inn where you can stay. Clean, respectable place run by a widow named Mrs. Hollister. And you, where will you stay?" "The ranger station has bunks." He glanced at her. "I'll check on you in the morning. We can rest a day before continuing to Silver Creek if that suits you." The thought of parting from Russell, even briefly, caused an unexpected pang in Bethany's chest. She'd grown accustomed to his steady presence, the feeling of safety he provided. As they approached Fort Benton, the settlement came into clearer view, a collection of wooden buildings surrounding the actual fort, which stood on a bluff overlooking the Missouri River. People moved about on the main street, and wagons were parked outside various establishments. "It's larger than I expected," Bethany commented. "It's a trading post and river port, busiest place between St. Louis and Helena during the season." Russell pointed to a 2-story building with a sign showing a lantern. "That's Hollister's Inn." They had just reached the outskirts of town when 3 riders emerged from a side trail, cutting directly into their path. Russell immediately moved his horse in front of Bethany's, his hand going to his revolver. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Something I can help you with?" The men, rough-looking types with unshaven faces and dirty clothing, exchanged glances. The one in the middle, wearing a battered cavalry hat, spoke up. "That your woman, Ranger?" Russell's expression hardened. "That's none of your concern." "Now step aside and let us pass." The man smirked. "Heard there was a pretty widow on the trail with a baby, thought she might need protection." His gaze slid to Bethany, who clutched Samuel tighter. "She has all the protection she needs," Russell replied coldly. "And you boys look an awful lot like the rustlers I've been tracking. Might be worth taking you in for questioning." The tension was palpable as the men considered their options. Finally, the leader spat on the ground. "We ain't done nothing worth questioning, Ranger, just being neighborly." He jerked his head at his companions. "Come on, boys, town's waiting." They urged their horses around Russell and Bethany, deliberately riding too close. As they passed, the leader turned in his saddle. "See you around, widow lady." Russell waited until they were well down the road before turning to Bethany. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her heart was racing. "Were those the men you've been tracking? I can't be certain, but they fit the description." His jaw tightened. "I don't like them knowing about you and Samuel. Should we turn back?" Russell shook his head. "No, Fort Benton is safer than the open trail, but I think we'll change our plans." He looked at her directly. "I won't be taking you to the inn. You'll stay at the ranger station with me tonight." Bethany's eyes widened. "Is that appropriate? There's a separate room for witnesses and such. It has a lock on the door." His expression was grave. "I don't trust those men, and I don't want to take chances with your safety." The ranger station was a sturdy building near the fort itself. Inside, it was simple but clean: a desk, some chairs, a gun rack, and doors leading to other rooms. The only other person present was an older ranger named Jim, who raised his eyebrows at the sight of Bethany and Samuel but asked no questions when Russell briefly explained the situation. The witness room was small but comfortable, with a bed, washstand, and chair. Russell brought in extra blankets and made sure Bethany had everything she needed. "I'll be just outside if you need anything," he assured her. "And this door locks from the inside." That night, alone in the small room with Samuel sleeping beside her, Bethany found herself thinking about Russell Fairfield. In just 2 days, this stranger had become someone she trusted implicitly. It wasn't just gratitude she felt toward him, there was something more, something that both frightened and exhilarated her. She thought of Thomas, of the whirlwind romance they'd had back in Pennsylvania. He'd swept her off her feet with grand promises and dreams of adventure. Their marriage had been happy enough, but the harsh realities of frontier life had gradually worn away at Thomas's enthusiasm, leaving him restless and sometimes distant. Russell was different: solid, dependable, realistic about the challenges of this life but not defeated by them. She wondered what it would be like to build a life with someone like that, someone who didn't chase rainbows but instead created security from the materials at hand. Such thoughts felt like a betrayal of Thomas's memory, and Bethany pushed them away. Her focus needed to be on reaching Silver Creek and establishing a safe home for Samuel. Nothing else mattered. Morning came with a gentle knock on her door. Russell's voice called that breakfast was ready whenever she was. Bethany dressed quickly, changed Samuel, and joined the Rangers in the main room. Jim had departed for his patrol, leaving Russell alone at the small table where he'd laid out a simple meal of beans, biscuits, and coffee. "I'm afraid it's not much," he apologized. "Rangers aren't known for their cooking skills." "It looks wonderful," Bethany assured him, sitting down with Samuel on her lap. "Thank you for taking care of us." Russell poured her a cup of coffee. "I've been thinking about our next move. Those men yesterday trouble me." "Do you think they'll cause problems?" "I can't say for certain, but my instincts tell me they might." He took a sip of his coffee. "I've decided to escort you all the way to Silver Creek myself. We'll leave tomorrow at first light." Bethany felt both relief and something else a fluttering in her chest at the thought of more time with him. "Won't your superiors mind?" "I've already spoken with the commander. Since I believe these men might be the rustlers I've been tracking, it falls within my duties to continue investigating." He smiled slightly. "And protecting citizens is always a ranger's responsibility." After breakfast, Russell suggested they gather supplies for the journey to Silver Creek. "It's a 1.5-day ride from here. We'll need to camp one night on the trail." They walked together to the general store, Samuel babbling happily in Bethany's arms. The town was busy, with wagons and horses crowding the muddy Main Street. Several people nodded respectfully to Russell as they passed. In the store, Russell methodically selected provisions: coffee, jerky, flour, and other staples. Bethany wandered the aisles, looking at fabrics and household goods she couldn't afford. She paused by a display of baby items: tiny shoes, soft blankets, and wooden toys. "You should get something for the little fella," the shopkeeper's wife suggested, coming to stand beside her. "Babies need playthings to grow smart," Bethany smiled sadly. "I wish I could, but my funds are limited." The woman studied her for a moment, then selected a small wooden rattle. "This was my grandson's. He's too big for it now. Please take it for your boy." Before Bethany could protest, Russell appeared beside them. "That's kind of you, Mrs. Peterson. Samuel will appreciate it." As they left the store, Bethany clutched the rattle, overwhelmed by the stranger's generosity. "Everyone has been so kind. Good people recognize when someone genuinely needs help," Russell said. "It's the frontier way. We all depend on each other out here." They spent the rest of the day preparing for their journey. Russell showed Bethany maps of the territory, pointing out the route they would take to Silver Creek and describing what to expect along the way. "There's a creek about halfway where we'll camp," he explained. "Good water and some shelter from the trees." That evening, as they shared a simple dinner at the ranger station, Bethany found the courage to ask a question that had been on her mind. "What will you do after you've delivered us to Silver Creek?" Russell set down his fork, considering. "Back to ranger duties, I suppose." "There's always work to be done. Do you ever think about settling down?" The question felt too personal the moment it left her lips. If Russell was surprised by her boldness, he didn't show it. "Sometimes, this life gets lonely." He met her eyes briefly before looking away. "But it would take a special kind of woman to accept what comes with the badge." The unspoken hung between them, a mutual awareness that something was developing, something neither was ready to name. They departed Fort Benton at dawn the next day, riding southeast toward Silver Creek. The weather was fair, with high clouds offering occasional relief from the sun. Samuel, growing more accustomed to travel, watched the passing landscape with wide eyes from his sling. Russell was more vigilant than before, frequently scanning their surroundings and sometimes doubling back to ensure they weren't being followed. His concern was contagious, and Bethany found herself jumping at small noises: a bird taking flight, a twig snapping beneath a deer's hoof. "I'm sorry if I'm making you nervous," Russell said, noticing her tension. "I just want to be careful." "Do you really think those men might follow us?" Russell's expression was grim. "Men like that, they see a woman alone as an opportunity, and they didn't like being challenged by a ranger." They stopped briefly around midday to rest the horses and feed Samuel. As Bethany sat on a fallen log cradling her son, Russell stood nearby, his rifle across his arm. "Tell me about Silver Creek," he said. "What will you do there?" Bethany had been avoiding thinking too specifically about her future. "Charlotte, my cousin, she works at the hotel there. She wrote that they might have a position for me, laundress or kitchen help most likely. And Samuel, she said there's a woman who watches children for the working mothers." Bethany's voice faltered slightly. The thought of leaving Samuel with a stranger for long hours pained her. Russell seemed to sense her distress. "It's a hard life for a woman alone," he said softly, "especially with a child." "We'll manage," Bethany replied, summoning determination she didn't entirely feel. "Women have done it before." Russell nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yes, they have, but they shouldn't have to." They continued their journey through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing from open plains to more wooded terrain. By early evening, they reached the creek Russell had mentioned. "We'll camp here for the night," he said, helping Bethany dismount. "The water's clean, and these trees will give us some shelter." Russell efficiently set up their camp, building a small fire, arranging their bedrolls, and tethering the horses where they could graze. Bethany prepared a simple meal from their provisions, and they ate as twilight deepened around them. Samuel, tired from the day's travel, fell asleep shortly after eating. Bethany laid him carefully on her bedroll, tucking blankets around him. "He's a good boy," Russell commented, watching from across the fire. "Hardly complains despite all he's been through." "He's like his father that way," Bethany said softly. "Thomas could endure anything without complaint." She paused, realizing something. "I haven't cried for him yet, not properly. Isn't that strange?" Russell poked at the fire with a stick. "Grief comes in its own time. And sometimes survival has to come first." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling fire and the gentle babble of the creek nearby. Bethany found herself studying Russell's profile in the firelight, the strong line of his jaw, the thoughtful set of his mouth. "May I ask you something personal?" she said suddenly. Russell looked up, meeting her gaze. "Of course. Are you happy? With your life as a ranger?" He considered the question seriously. "Most days. I believe in what I do, protecting people, upholding the law in places where law is still new." He added another small branch to the fire. "But there are lonely times, empty cabins, cold beds." His eyes met hers briefly. "What about you? Were you happy with Thomas?" The directness of the question startled her, but she found herself answering honestly. "I loved him, but happiness. It came and went. Thomas was always chasing the next opportunity, the next adventure. Sometimes I felt I was just along for the ride." "And what would make you happy?" Bethany Rawlins, her breath caught at the sound of her first name on his lips. "Stability, a home that stays in one place. Someone who sees me as more than just a companion on their journey." The words felt like a confession. Russell nodded slowly. "Those are worthy desires." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then Samuel stirred and whimpered, breaking the spell. Bethany turned to attend to him, and by the time she'd settled him again, Russell had moved to check the horses. "You should get some rest," he said when he returned. "I'll take first watch." Bethany wanted to protest that no watch was necessary, but she knew better. Instead, she nodded and settled beside Samuel on her bedroll. "Wake me when it's my turn," she said. Russell smiled faintly. "Sleep through the night, Bethany. I'll be fine." She wanted to argue, but found her eyes already heavy with exhaustion. As she drifted toward sleep, she was aware of Russell's solid presence nearby, keeping watch over them both. Bethany woke once in the night, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a faint red glow over their small camp. Russell sat with his back against a tree, rifle across his knees, looking out into the darkness. "Is everything all right?" she whispered. He turned, his expression softening when he saw she was awake. "Everything's fine, go back to sleep." Instead, she rose and moved to sit beside him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the night chill. "You should be resting," Russell chided gently. "I've slept enough." She gazed up at the stars visible through the tree branches. "It's beautiful out here, isn't it? Despite all the dangers." "Yes," Russell agreed, though when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the stars. The intensity of his gaze made her flush. "Russell," she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond their camp. Russell was immediately alert, one hand going to his revolver while the other motioned for Bethany to be still. They listened, barely breathing. After a long moment, a deer emerged from the trees, regarding them with liquid eyes before bounding away. The tension broke, and they both exhaled. Russell's hand, which had moved protectively in front of Bethany, slowly withdrew. "Just a deer," he said unnecessarily. Bethany nodded, her heart still racing, though whether from fear or from his nearness she couldn't say. "I should check on Samuel," she murmured, rising. Russell caught her hand as she turned to go. "Bethany." His voice was low, uncertain. He stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "Be careful with your heart, you're still grieving." She understood what he was really saying, that whatever was developing between them was complicated by her recent widowhood, by her vulnerability. It was both a warning and a consideration of her feelings that touched her deeply. "I know," she replied softly, "but grief isn't the only thing I feel." She returned to her bedroll, aware of his eyes following her. Sleep was long in coming after that. Morning dawned clear and cool. They broke camp efficiently, Bethany feeding and changing Samuel while Russell saddled the horses. By the time the sun had fully risen, they were already on the trail. "We should reach Silver Creek by mid-afternoon," Russell said. "The terrain gets easier from here." As they rode, Bethany found herself torn between anticipation of reaching their destination and regret that their journey together would soon end. What would happen when they reached Silver Creek? Would Russell simply deliver her to Charlotte and then ride away? The thought created a hollow feeling in her chest. In less than a week, This man had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something deeper, a recognition of something essential in him that called to something in her. Around midday, the trail emerged from wooded hills into a broad valley. In the distance, they could see smoke rising from what must be Silver Creek. "There it is," Russell said, pointing. "Another couple of hours." Bethany felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. "It's smaller than I expected. Most places out here are, but it's a decent town. Good people from what I hear." They continued toward Silver Creek, the horses picking up their pace as if sensing the end of their journey. Samuel had fallen asleep in his sling, his small body warm against Bethany's chest. As they approached the outskirts of town, Bethany suddenly reined in her horse. Russell stopped beside her, looking concerned. "What's wrong?" Bethany struggled to find words for the tumult of emotions inside her. I just needed a moment before we arrive." Russell nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's a big step, starting over in a new place." "Yes." She looked at him directly. "Russell, I want to thank you for everything, for saving us, really." "You would have made it without me," he said. "You're stronger than you realize, Bethany Rawlins." The way he said her name made her heart ache. Will I see you again after today?" The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Russell's expression was unreadable for a moment, then he turned his horse to face hers directly. "I'd like that," he said quietly. "Very much." Relief flooded through her. "So would I." Russell seemed about to say more when the sound of approaching horses made them both turn. 3 riders were coming up the trail behind them, the same men they'd encountered outside Fort Benton. Russell immediately moved his horse between Bethany and the approaching riders, his hand going to his revolver. "Stay behind me," he ordered, all warmth gone from his voice. The men reined in their horses a short distance away, the leader grinning unpleasantly. "Well, if it ain't the ranger and his widow lady," he drawled. "Fancy meeting you folks again." "This is official ranger business," Russell said coldly. "Move along." The man's grin widened. "Thing is, Ranger, we've got business too. See, that pretty little widow is carrying something that belongs to us." Bethany's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? I've never seen you before Fort Benton." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Maybe not us specifically, madam, but your husband, he took something that wasn't his. And now we've come to collect." Russell's posture remained rigid. "Whatever dispute you had with her husband died with him. Now move on before I arrest you for harassment." The 3 men exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Then, with shocking speed, all 3 drew their weapons. "I don't think so, Ranger," the leader said. "The widow comes with us. The baby too, if she wants it to stay breathing." Time seemed to slow. Russell drew his revolver with practiced efficiency, but he was outnumbered. Bethany clutched Samuel tighter, her mind racing. What could Thomas have possibly taken from these men? Then she remembered the small leather pouch Thomas had brought home a week before he fell ill. He'd been secretive about it, saying only that it was their insurance for the future. She'd found it while gathering their belongings after the fire and had tucked it into her bag without examination. "Is it a pouch?" she asked suddenly. "Small brown leather," the leader's expression confirmed her guess. "Smart lady, hand it over and maybe we let you keep riding to Silver Creek." Russell glanced at her questioningly. Bethany nodded slightly yes, she had what they wanted. "It's in my saddlebag," she said. "I'll need to get it," slowly, the leader warned. "And Ranger, you keep that gun pointed at the ground." As Bethany reached for her saddlebag, Samuel woke and began to cry. The sudden noise startled the horses, and in that moment of confusion, Russell made his move. He fired twice in rapid succession, hitting one man in the shoulder and causing another's horse to rear. The leader fired back, the bullet whistling past Russell's head. "Go," Russell shouted to Bethany. "Ride for town now." Instinct took over. Bethany dug her heels into her horse's flanks and the animal bolted toward Silver Creek. Behind her, she heard more gunshots, but she didn't dare look back. Her entire focus was on protecting Samuel and reaching safety. The town suddenly seemed very far away. Her horse, sensing her fear, galloped at full speed. Samuel wailed against her chest, terrified by the noise and motion. When she finally risked a glance back, her heart nearly stopped. Russell was still exchanging fire with the remaining men, but he'd been hit. She could see the dark stain spreading on his left sleeve. Bethany reached the first buildings of Silver Creek, shouting for help. Several men ran from a saloon, alerted by her cries. When she frantically explained the situation, they immediately mounted up and rode to Russell's aid. By the time they returned, supporting a grimacing but conscious Russell between them, a crowd had gathered. The town doctor pushed through, directing the men to bring Russell to his office. Bethany followed, still clutching Samuel, who had finally quieted to whimpering sniffles. Inside the doctor's small office, they laid Russell on an examination table. He was pale but alert, his eyes immediately seeking Bethany. "You're safe," he said, relief evident in his voice despite his pain. "Thanks to you," she replied, moving to his side. "How bad is it?" the doctor, who had cut away Russell's sleeve, answered. "Clean through the meat of the arm, painful but not life-threatening if infection doesn't set in." He looked at Bethany. "You his wife?" Before she could answer, Russell spoke. "She's under my protection, official Ranger business." The doctor raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. "Well, whoever she is, she should wait outside while I deal with this wound." Reluctantly, Bethany stepped out into the small waiting area. A kind-faced older woman approached her. "You look like you could use some tea, dear," she said, "and somewhere to tend to your little one. I'm Martha Hollister. I run the boarding house just down the street." "Thank you," Bethany said gratefully. "I'm looking for Charlotte Reynolds." "She works at the hotel here." Martha's expression changed subtly. "Charlotte? Oh my dear, I'm afraid she's not in Silver Creek anymore. She left about 2 months ago with a cattle buyer from Wyoming." The news hit Bethany like a physical blow. Her one connection in this town, her entire plan for the future, was gone. "I see," she managed, trying to keep her voice steady. "I didn't know." Martha patted her arm sympathetically. "Come to the boarding house anyway, we'll sort something out." Over the next hour, as Martha served her tea and helped her change Samuel, Bethany learned that Charlotte had left no forwarding address. She had effectively arrived in Silver Creek with no connection, no job prospects, and limited funds. When she returned to the doctor's office, she found Russell sitting up, his arm bandaged. He looked relieved to see her. "The men?" she asked. "One dead, one wounded and in custody, one escaped," Russell replied grimly. "The sheriff is sending telegrams to nearby towns to watch for him." The doctor stepped in. "Ranger Fairfield needs rest. That arm won't be much use for a week or more." Bethany nodded, then took a deep breath. "Russell, Charlotte is gone. She left town 2 months ago." She saw understanding dawn in his eyes, understanding of her situation, of her sudden uncertainty. "I see." He was quiet for a moment, then spoke to the doctor. "Is there somewhere in town I can recuperate? A boarding house, perhaps?" "Martha Hollister runs a good place," the doctor replied. "But it might not be proper for Mrs. Rawlins is a widow traveling under my protection," Russell interrupted firmly. "There's nothing improper about ensuring her safety until other arrangements can be made." At Martha's boarding house, Russell was given a room on the first floor while Bethany and Samuel were settled in a small but comfortable room upstairs. After the events of the day, Bethany was exhausted, but sleep eluded her as she pondered her situation. The next morning, she found Russell sitting on the boarding house porch, his bandaged arm in a sling. He stood when he saw her, his expression concerned. "How are you this morning?" he asked. "I should be asking you that," she replied, nodding toward his injured arm. "It's nothing serious." He gestured for her to sit beside him. "Bethany, we need to talk about what happens next," she nodded, having spent most of the night thinking about the same question. "I have some money saved, not much, but enough to rent a room somewhere for a few weeks while I look for work." Russell's expression was troubled. "And after that, what's your long-term plan?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought Charlotte would help me get established here, but now." She trailed off, the uncertainty of her future overwhelming. Russell was quiet for a long moment, his gaze focused on the street beyond the porch. Finally, he turned to her. "I have a proposal," he said carefully. "Not a romantic one, not yet anyway. That would be too soon for both of us." He took a deep breath. "I own land, about a day's ride from Fort Benton. 40 acres with a small cabin. It was my brother's before he moved to Oregon. I've kept it maintained but haven't had time to do much with it." Bethany listened, uncertain where this was leading. "I've been thinking about giving up the Ranger badge," Russell continued. "Not immediately, but soon. That land could be a good place to start a new life." He met her eyes directly. "I'm proposing a partnership of sorts. You and Samuel could live on the land. I'd provide for you both while I finish my time as a ranger another 6 months or so. Then," he hesitated. "Then, if we've come to care for each other as I think we might, we could consider marriage." Bethany's heart pounded in her chest. "And if we don't?" "Come to care for each other that way, I mean." "Then the land would still be yours and Samuel's," Russell said simply. "I've no use for it otherwise, and a child should have a home." The generosity of his offer stunned her. "Russell, I can't accept such a gift." "It's not charity," he said, echoing his words from their first meeting. "It's human decency, and perhaps something more given time." Bethany considered his proposal. It offered security, a home for Samuel, and the possibility of a future with a man she was rapidly coming to admire and care for. But it was also a risk binding her future to someone she'd known for less than a week. "I need time to think," she said finally. Russell nodded. "Of course, take all the time you need." Over the next few days, as Russell recovered and Bethany explored Silver Creek, they spent their evenings on the boarding house porch, talking. She learned about his childhood in Missouri, his decision to become a ranger after the war, his dreams of eventually settling down to ranch and raise horses. He listened as she shared stories of her life in Pennsylvania, her journey west with Thomas, her hopes for Samuel's future. Each conversation deepened their connection, confirmed their compatibility. Bethany found herself looking forward to their talks, to the way Russell's eyes crinkled when he smiled, to the gentle way he handled Samuel, who had taken to reaching for the ranger whenever he was near. A week after their arrival in Silver Creek, Bethany made her decision. She found Russell on the porch in his usual spot, watching the sunset. Samuel was asleep upstairs after an exhausting day of charming the boarding house residents. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she said, sitting beside him. Russell turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "And I accept," she said simply, "not just for the security or for Samuel, but because I want to see where this journey between us leads." The smile that spread across Russell's face was like the sunrise, gradual, then brilliant. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but certain. "I'm glad," he said softly. "Very glad." "But I have conditions," Bethany added, though she couldn't help smiling back. "I won't be idle while you're ranging. I'll work the land, make it productive. And when you return, if we decide to marry, it will be as equals, partners in every sense." Russell nodded, his expression serious. "I wouldn't want it any other way." In that moment, sitting on a boarding house porch in a small frontier town, Bethany felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Hope. Not the desperate hope that had sustained her on the long trail with Samuel, but a stronger, steadier hope built on mutual respect and the promise of genuine companionship. As if sensing the significance of the moment, Russell leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Bethany met him halfway, their lips coming together in a gentle kiss that held both promise and restraint. When they parted, Russell kept hold of her hand. "We'll take it slow," he said. "Build something that lasts." Bethany nodded, thinking of the long trail behind her and the new path ahead. One step at a time. A month later, Bethany stood on the porch of a small cabin nestled among pine trees, watching as Russell rode away to begin his final tour as a ranger. Samuel squirmed in her arms, reaching after the departing horseman. "He'll be back," she assured her son. "And while we wait, we have work to do." Over the next 6 months, Bethany transformed the neglected homestead. She planted a garden, acquired chickens and a milk cow, and with the help of neighboring farmers, repaired the cabin's roof and added a small bedroom for Samuel. Each week brought a letter from Russell, reports of his work, inquiries about their well-being, and increasingly expressions of his growing affection. In her replies, Bethany shared the daily triumphs and challenges of homestead life. She told him about Samuel's first steps, taken in the garden patch, about the friendships she was forming with neighboring women, about the quiet contentment she found in working the land. And she wrote of her feelings for him, how they had grown from gratitude into respect, from respect into affection, and from affection into something deeper that she was almost ready to call love. When winter came, bringing snow and bitter cold, Bethany would often stand at the window in the evenings, Samuel asleep in his small bed, and think of that night on the trail when Russell had first ridden beside them. How far they had come since then, and how much further they might go together. On a clear spring morning, Bethany looked up from her gardening to see a familiar figure on horseback approaching. Samuel, now toddling confidently, saw him too and let out a delighted squeal. "Ruse," he cried, using the name he had given the ranger in his absence. Bethany straightened, wiping her hands on her apron, her heart racing as Russell dismounted. He looked leaner, more weathered than when he'd left, but his eyes were the same steady, kind, and now filled with something that made her breath catch. He approached slowly as he had that first night on the trail, respectful of her space. But unlike that night, Bethany didn't wait for him to reach her. She moved toward him, meeting him halfway, just as Samuel collided with Russell's legs and demanded to be lifted. Laughing, Russell scooped up the boy with one arm, his other hand reaching for Bethany. When their fingers touched, she felt the rough fabric of something in his palm, a small cloth pouch. "What's this?" she asked. Russell smiled, a hint of nervousness in his expression. "Open it." Inside the pouch was a simple gold band, nothing fancy but solid and well-crafted. "I turned in my badge," Russell said quietly, "for good this time." Bethany looked from the ring to his face, searching his eyes. "Are you sure?" she asked. "This life, it's not exciting like ranging." "It's hard work and long days, and it's what I want," Russell interrupted gently. "You and Samuel and this land, this is home now." He shifted Samuel to his other arm. "If you'll have me, that is." Bethany slipped the ring onto her finger, finding that it fit perfectly. "We'll have you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "As husband, as father, as partner." Russell's free arm encircled her waist, drawing her close. Samuel giggled between them, patting both their faces with chubby hands. "Ruse stay?" he asked hopefully. Russell pressed a kiss to the boy's forehead, then one to Bethany's lips. "Yes," he said, his voice steady with certainty. "I'm staying, for good." As the three of them walked hand in hand toward the cabin that had become a home, Bethany thought of all the steps that had led to this moment, the long trail she had walked alone with her child, and the night a ranger had ridden beside them, changing their path forever. They had both traveled far to find each other, but the journey ahead was the one that mattered now, the one they would make together, step by step, day by day, building a life from the solid ground beneath their feet and the love that had grown between them.